pleasure to introduce our final presenter, Ahyicodae, known to all of us as Ico. I was pleased to serve on her committee along with Larry Sutton. She's perhaps our only graduate that I'm aware of to participate in both our MFA program in fiction and also in both of our MFA programs in fiction, fitting into her MFA a full semester in our low residency program in writing for children and young adults. Through that program, she worked with Alexandria LaFay on the early drafts of her young adult novel, Isle in the Sea of Ghosts. This intense grounding in the particulars of young adult fiction may account for some of her novel's remarkable accomplishment, but not for all of it. Ico is a writer of intelligence, diligence, humility, and ambition. She sets the bar high, works hard, and brings a joyous spirit of why not to the process of creating worlds, characters, and thought-provoking fiction. Ico writes fiction with a capital F. The haunting Isle in the Sea of Ghosts is a mythic world on a parallel plane with our own, an achievement in world building all by itself, her novel is. Her narrator is a teenage boy who, harassed about his sexuality and heartbroken, throws himself off a bridge into the chilly waters of what turns out to be a way station between life and death. He's a complicated character whose dark humor is often expressed in quips and in Latin. I hope Ico is going to talk this morning about the challenge of creating Blair's voice. It led her to some interesting and unconventional methods for getting into a character. The Island in the Sea of Ghosts is a complex and philosophically challenging novel that speaks from the heart of adolescent despair and speaks to the power of friendship and reads like the wind. Ico teaches composition at Globe University and runs the Writing Center at their downtown campus. While in our program, she also served as the assistant editor for CNF in the Waterstone Review. Please welcome Ahyicodae.
Funny actually that you talked about the stuff I did to find Blair's voice. That's actually the slide I took out because my thing was too long, but maybe I'll try and squeeze it back in at the end. So yeah, my thesis is the YA novel, Isle in the Sea of Ghosts, and rather than talk so much about the process of getting through Thesis, I wanted to talk about a lot about what comes after. So this is why it's subtitled Thesis and what comes next. Because many people going through this program, presumably, some of you want an MFA because at some point you want to publish a book, probably, possibly. So I'm going to tell you a little about my journey from thesis to how do I get to the next step to that publishing part. Obviously it's from a fiction and genre fiction perspective, but I think a lot of it is similar if you are doing nonfiction as well and trying to do a memoir or something. Okay, so first, rather than read from my book, I thought I would just read to you the blurb that I wrote to pitch my book. So here's the blurb. This tells you about the story. Yesterday, all Blair wanted was to die. That's all. Just a quick and simple jump over a railing, a single leap off a bridge, and ending. What he got was brain damage, or maybe eternal damnation. Instead of cutting off his aimless existence, defines you as a person, I serve ice cream to children and swear at them in Latin, suicide brought him about 1 million complications. He's now trapped on an isle in the river Styx, his spirit caught between life and death while his body is in a coma. He must decide whether to build a boat and sail back to the shore of life and face the permanent brain damage incurred by his jump, or bribe the ferryman Karen to take his soul over the Styx to death. If he doesn't escape the isle before his body dies, his soul will be trapped for eternity. He will need all his wit and determination to overcome the afterlife's perils, a cunning trickster in a fox mask, a monster with 1,000 voices, a grim reaper who's set on destroying him, and most dangerous of all, his own deeply buried reasons for killing himself. So there's my blurb. Come back to that in a minute. All right, so a little bit about the thesis before I move on to what came afterwards. I just want to talk about a few things that can be helpful through the thesis process. So what I did, these are the things, MFA, MFAC, semester, and then Waterstone Review. One of the great advantages here at Hamline is the huge variety. Not many MFA programs have, an MFA for children at the same campus, and a literary magazine that you can be a part of. All that stuff shaped my writing immensely and is hugely valuable. And I say this as someone who, when I first came in, I thought, well, it's all about workshopping. Like, I don't care about Waterstone because that's editing. You don't even write in that class. Why would I want to take that? And, all I want is to be in a workshop. People will tell me what's wrong with me. I'll fix it. I'll be done. It'll be great. So that was, like, sort of the very narrow perspective I had on what makes a good writer. So, coming from that perspective, I can tell you now how completely wrong I was, and that you should take advantage of the differences. Is anyone here writing any kind of children's writing? Okay. If you put your hand up, for heaven's sake, do this. Take a semester in the MFAC and use it towards your MFA program, because writing for kids and writing for adults is completely different, and the things you learn in the two programs, the style of workshopping, everything, totally different, so worth it. You should absolutely do it. It's probably the best thing that you could do to improve your writing as a writer for children. Because for one thing, in writing for children, the focus is a lot more on entertainment, because you're talking about teenagers or even younger kids. They're not going to read your book 100 pages in to get to the good stuff. You kind of have to do it right away. And your readings reflect the writing. In the MFA program, you're reading a lot of like New Yorker style fiction kind of stuff, which is not what kids read. So if you take the MFAC, then you will read what kids read, and it really helps to read in your own genre. Waterstone, learning editorial skills. If there's a single thing that all of you do, you should take Waterstone, because what you learn in this is not something that you can get from workshopping. The two things that can do more for your writing than workshopping, at least did more for my writing in a lot of ways, was reading widely in your genre and subject, which I'll come back to, and learning editorial discrimination between what is good writing, right? You read stuff in workshop and you think, oh, this is pretty good, yeah, pretty good. And learning what you would want to put in the journal when you have to read dozens and dozens and dozens of entries, and you say, well, here are all the pretty good ones, but this has to go in. And that kind of discrimination you don't get from workshopping is so invaluable when you're trying to figure out, is my work ready to send out? Okay, so that's my plug for those things. The other thing that you'll want to do before you finish thesis, get some CPs, critique partners. Right now, you're all enrolled, and so you have workshops and things like that. You get feedback from your instructors. It's awesome. As soon as you get out of thesis, or actually as soon as you get into thesis, that's done, because you're not in classes anymore, and suddenly it's like you have to write by yourself, and you're like, well, I don't have any deadlines, I don't have anyone reading my work, I have, what do I do? So having good critique partners and building those connections now can really keep you motivated. You want to look for people who are both in and out of your genre, can be helpful, right, to see different styles. At the same stage in the process is really, really helpful. If you're at that stage where, okay, your book is just about done, you want to swap books with someone, it's kind of hard to do that with someone who's only got a couple of essays. It's really nice to swap work with someone who's got an entire book. So try and find people who are at the same stage in the process. If you're ready to query your book, look for agents, find someone else who's at that polishing stage. And it's nice to have local and online groups. A lot of people I connected with in my Hamline program, we now have a critique group that we meet regularly every single month and look at each other's work, and it keeps us writing and keeps us in discussion, keeps us sharp. I also exchange work with people that I've met online writing more genre fiction, because there's not as many genre fiction writers here at Hamline, but there were a lot that I connected with. It makes a huge difference. So that's definitely something you're going to want to do before you finish. It's a huge part of the process. I'm sorry, I talk really fast. I just noticed that now. But I'm going to try and speed through because I have a lot of Okay. So, and before I finish this, I just, talking about critique partners and everything else that are so important, I really have to give a shout out to everybody, all my instructors who really helped with the thesis and everything else. Patricia and Larry were such amazing readers for me. Like, they made a huge difference. And Deborah, who taught my core class, that was a fabulous introduction to Hamline. Barry is no longer with us here at Hamline. She went to, I forgot the school, but anyway, she was in charge of Waterstone and the nonfiction, and I learned so much from her. Alexandria LaFay and the MFAC and all of the MFAC staff, and of course the fellow students that I was working with who are now my critique partners as we all embark on our publishing journey. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Okay, so back to this blurb. I need to find my notes. So let's say you finish your thesis, right? You've got your book. Everybody likes it. Your thesis advisors have passed you and they think it's good. Your critique partners tell you how awesome it is. Your mom has read it and she liked it. And so you're like, all right, I'm ready to get an agent. Well, first, before you get an agent, you need to have a query letter. Now, how many people know what a query letter is? Okay, I'll explain quickly then. So when you want to get a book published, especially if you're writing like I am, fiction, genre fiction, you generally need an agent to go and sell it to the different editors and publishing houses. It's very hard to just send your manuscript to like Random House or something and say, here's my book, read it. There are slush piles that some publishers have, but generally the process is to try and find an agent who will rep your work, who knows editors and has connections. But getting an agent is not easy. You have to first get them to read your work. And there are millions of people who want to get their books published. So you have to write a letter in which in 2 or 3 paragraphs you summarize your book, make it sound really enticing, get all the important stuff in there, and get them to want to ask you for pages to read. So basically they're going to judge your entire book on this blurb. If they like your blurb, then they will ask you to send them pages. If they don't like it, then you will never hear from them except, a rejection. And lately, the system has become you might not ever hear from them because a lot of them have a no response means no policy. So the blurb is very important. Your entire query letter should be about 1 page. It's composed of your blurb. Okay, this is not supposed to be it. I'm not reading this part. But anyway, it's composed of your blurb and a short personalization to the agent, who in theory you've researched to make sure they're legit and they rep your particular genre. And a little bit about you if you have previous publications. You would all mention that you've graduated from the MFA program at Hamline, that's relevant. Any awards or things like that. So, this was the blurb that I wrote for my query letter. This is not the first draft that I wrote. I wrote several drafts of like 3 or so. I decided this was the better one. I sent it to my CPs. They all looked at it. They all liked it. I did some revision, and this is what I sent out to 10 agents on my list. How many of them do you think requested my novel? That is correct. A big fat 0. My blurb was not good enough. And this is the stage. This is sort of where reality hit, because up until then everyone had liked my book and I thought it was amazing and that everyone was going to want to read it. So this is the stage where reality hit and I entered what writers call query hell. And this is the part where you realize it's actually really hard to get a book published, because first you need, and it seems really unfair, because it's like, I was pretty sure my book was amazing, and if they would just read the darn thing, they'd want to publish it, but they wouldn't even read it because my letter wasn't good enough. So this is where you really need to master the skill of query writing. It's an entirely separate kind of skill set, but you have to have a good query, because if you don't, the agent won't even read your manuscript to see how brilliant you are. So, a few resources I wanted to share with you. Query Shark, this is the first one. Literary agent Janet Reed, or the Query Shark, reads queries and critiques them. I actually opened it already, so we don't have to wait for it to load. And I'm just going to sort of go through them up here, because they're already here. So, this is her blog. You can see 228 people have sent their queries in, and she has critiqued all of those, and many of them are revised queries. She reads it, she leaves her comments about why it works or does not work as a query, and then at the end she explains, would she request pages, or would she give a form rejection, or rejection with some kind of qualifier. Most of them are form rejections, but she explains why. It's very useful to read the archives and all these queries. I haven't read all 228, but I've probably read about 100 of them. It really helps you see how to get the major points of the novel succinctly, or the memoir, whatever it is you're selling, so that they sound like they entice the person to want to read. Another really useful website, Agent Query Connect. This website is very useful because writers meet here and can post their queries and give feedback and get feedback. So, my query letter didn't work. What did I do? My CPs, who had already read the book, had read it and liked it. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get feedback from some people who are total strangers, so they won't be nice to me, and who haven't read the book at all, so they won't be taking that knowledge and putting it into the query. So I posted my query letter here, gave some feedback, and as you can see, I got quite a lot of feedback on things to improve. And it's really helpful. So when you're in the querying process, sites like Agent Query Connect, or another one called Absolute Right, like this one, which is Absolute Right, have forums where you can post your work and get feedback from people who are in the same process. They're querying also. Many of them have successful query letters. Some of them are still struggling to make theirs work, and by critiquing other people's queries, you get better at writing it yourself. This particular site, Absolute Right, is also a good site to use if you're doing research on agents. There are a lot of illegitimate agents out there who you do not want to send your work to, because they're scammers who will charge you all kinds of fees and pretend they're going to rep your work and then just take your money. Look them up on sites like this, and you can find out if they're a reputable or non-reputable agency. Predators and Editors is another one that you'll want to look at. If you look at their listing of agents, you click any letter, and you can go down and see all these different agencies. A little $sign means that within the last year they've made legitimate sales to Publishers Marketplace. And if they say not recommended, you probably don't want to send your work to them. Sometimes they explain why they're not recommended and sometimes not. So yeah, so those are all very great resources. Did I miss any? Nope, that's all of them. And back to this. So yeah, and also when you are in this query process, you want to do a lot of research on Google on agents so that you can personalize your query letter to them and know what sort of things they're looking for exactly. You know, if they say, oh, I really have a thing for wounded narrators, and you have a wounded narrator, you can mention that in your query letter and it helps. I've actually seen that one particularly. And then you can also find out if they have pet peeves, like if they say, well, I hate time travel, and your story is a time travel, don't send to them. Okay, so my revised query after the feedback and everything. Jumping off a bridge was supposed to kill Blair. Unfortunately, the Grim Reaper won't take him. Now he's trapped on an island in the river Styx, where the souls of comatose people hover between life and death. Everyone makes a choice, cross with the Reaper to death or sail back to life and wake up, except Blair. Blair can't choose because the rules are special for suicides. Suicides can't cross, they can't leave. When their comatose bodies die, they don't go to the afterlife. They wind up in the Styx, lost, damned for eternity. So when a lost soul named Yuki tells him she knows a way for him to wake up, Blair seizes the opportunity, but there's a catch. Yuki wants him to take her with him, and she's been dead for more than 15 years. Springing a lost soul from the Styx doesn't just mean bending the rules, it means shattering the rules, dueling the Grim Reaper, upending the very balance of life and death itself, all before his comatose body draws its final breath. If he succeeds, he'll give her the greatest prize of all, her life. If he loses, he'll forfeit the only thing he hasn't lost already, his soul. Much better, right? Yeah. This one has actually gotten responses. What you're aiming for with your query letter when you send them out, I would say send them out in batches of 6 to 10. You don't want to send it out to 50 agents and then figure out it doesn't work. What you're aiming for is about a 25 to 30% request rate. So if you send out 10, 3 agents say they want to see either a partial part of your manuscript or a full, your whole thing. That's pretty good. Your query's working then. If it's less than like 10%, then you might want to retool your query letter. Sometimes, of course, it's just luck, but that's sort of the general amount you're aiming for. This one has been about that for me, so I think this is about right. Okay, so you've got a query letter that works. What else can you do to help get your manuscript from thesis to publishing? You can enter contests. When you enter contests, you're going to want to have log lines. That's like a one-line pitch for your novel that makes it sound really cool. The first 250 words of your book, all polished up, because a lot of content has to see those. Your query and Twitter pitches. It's amazing how many agents like to find pitches for novels in 140 characters or less and say, that sounds cool, I want to read it. I think it's so pointless, but they love it. So have a Twitter pitch ready too. And speaking of that, follow author and agent blogs and follow their Twitter accounts. That's where you find these contests and stuff. If you have a Twitter account and you're following other authors, especially if they're in a similar process, they'll tweet about contests they're entering, and then you can go, oh, I'm going to enter that. Most of these contests are free. There are online conferences like WriteOnCon. It's a once-a-year conference where it's totally online. There's a forum. People post their work. They post the first 5 pages, the first 250 words, the query letter, and the synopsis. And you give feedback on other people's synopses, first 5 pages, and so on. While all these authors are giving feedback, there are agents also in there, incognito, that's why we have that ninja agent thing there, giving feedback on authors' work, and if the agent likes your work in the forums, then they will request it. In the meantime, there are video podcasts and things like that. It's a very cool conference. I actually did get a request out of it. It's the sort of thing that's worth participating. So if you just sort of search for these things on these forums, following agent blogs and Twitter accounts, you'll find this stuff. It's a great way to get noticed, especially if you're struggling with with queries. Contests can be a better way to get in. Actually, my first success came with contests. Plus, when you do contests, you're getting feedback. So if you enter a contest where an agent reads your query letter and doesn't request your work, there's still a good chance they'll give you the reason why, as opposed to if you just send a query letter to their agency and you'll just get a form letter back. So this isn't the right fit for us right now. So you want to have your synopsis, query, bio, and your manuscript ready. A quick note, this is a mistake I made myself. If you're sending a manuscript to an agent, make sure you format it for an e-reader, because they like to read things on Kindles and stuff nowadays, and you don't want all your paragraphs looking wonky and things like that, like they will if you don't properly format it. So there's instructions online on how to do that sort of thing. It's just one of those things you want to do. I'm kind of move into the closing now, first pages and first chapters. There's a reason that I saved this for after the thesis journey as opposed to during. Even though I was working on this stuff during the thesis, it's really afterwards, on the publication journey, that I realized how incredibly important it is. So contests often only include the first 250 or 500 words. That means, first of all, the agent's looking at your query letter, and if they like your query, they might ask for pages. If they read your pages, the first 5 pages, and you're not hooked in those pages, what do you think they do? Well, certainly not call you back, or email you back, or whatever the case is. They're going to stop reading right away if your opening doesn't grab them. So for my thesis, my opening was okay. Remember that sort of distinction that I mentioned? This is pretty good versus this, I need to have this. My thesis, this is pretty good for the opening, right? What made me realize that I needed work on it, after I had my query letter, the one that worked, I got a couple of requests, a partial and a full, and they were rejected like that. And so I thought, well, that was really fast. There's no way they read that whole manuscript. They probably only read the first couple pages and decided this wasn't working. So you really, really can't waste words. Those first pages are so crucial. And that's why, and it doesn't mean an action sequence when you revise. Note that a lot of people think right away, I have to have an action sequence. It's actually not what that means. You have to have a strong voice and strong writing and sort of get right to things, just don't waste words. This is why I think the chances are that the opening of your thesis, at least if you're going the traditional publishing route to get agents' attention, is probably not going to be the same as the opening of the manuscript you send on submission. Because those first few pages, they have to sing, or no one's going to read the rest of the manuscript. So, take it from me, I learned it the hard way. It's worth it to revise them with that in mind. And that's why the revision slide comes after the whole thesis process, because after thesis I spend a lot of time revising. So you go back to the step a lot. Every time you get a rejection, you wonder, well, should I have done something differently? If an agent rejects you and gives you feedback, for heaven's sake, take it, for the most part. Part of that revision is reading. My book, as you have probably gathered from the blurb, has to deal with suicide. I have never attempted suicide, and so I thought, well, maybe I should read some of the YA books that have to deal with this topic. I have basically bought or checked out, not every YA book on suicide, but many, many, many. And so reading all those really gave me a better perspective on how my novel fit in with what had been written before, how I might write things differently, how I might improve it. So whatever genre you're writing in, read widely in it. That makes a huge impact on the work. When your CPs give mostly positive feedback, but you still want to improve, read in your genre. Chances are you'll see some things that will spark ideas. When you feel something's lacking but you don't know how to fix it, read in your genre. When you know there are aspects of your protagonist that go beyond the scope of your own personal experience, read in your genre. And when good or pretty good is not enough, like the first one was pretty good but it's just not doing it, read in your genre. It makes a huge difference to see what's out there and how other people have done it. And last slide. When you're submitting, a few things you have to get used to. Obviously, rejection. If you have a good query with a 30% request rate, that still means you're being rejected 70% of the time. So it can be a little disheartening every time you get those. But don't give up. It's really important to stay positive. And keep in mind that the rejection can be a way to get better. Like for me, those first 2 rejections, they stung a lot, especially because they came back so fast. But honestly, having revised the beginning since then, it is so much stronger than it was before. Like I'm very glad it happened because I look at the book now and I'm so much more proud of it. And when I look back at the earlier draft, I think, oh, don't read that. So it can make you a better writer. Get used to waiting. Agents do not read query letters like that. I'm really bad at snapping my fingers. They often take anywhere from a couple weeks to many months. So you just have to wait. And while you're waiting, it's a good idea to work on a new project. And of course, if things are not working, be prepared to go back and revise. You really have to love your project enough to believe that the revision is worth it. And on this staying positive note, I have one final slide, or one final site that I wanted to show you. This is obviously not mine. This is an author, Lisa Reagan, but this is one that I found when I was feeling a little down because I'd gotten several rejections all in a row. And this is a pictorial of her journey to publication. So these are all the rejections she got. I'm afraid this doesn't work for me. I'm going to have to pass. I think I've gotten both of those. This book is not right for us. Thank you for your interest in our agency. We've read your query letter. We are grateful for the opportunity. Ultimately, we decided to pass. It was not a right fit for our list at this time. Your project is not a right fit for our agency. Thank you for your email, etc., etc. Not for me. Thanks anyway. Good luck with your book. This didn't pique my interest, and on and on and on. We are the best match for you. And then you wrote a damn good book. It's good. It is good when I cannot put it down. I would like to offer you a contract if you've got any kind of representation. So there you go.